exists, albeit to a lesser degree nowadays, thankfully. But still, there is a very common and extremely dangerous misconception around the heteronormativity of dating a trans person, specifically in terms of a heterosexual identified man and a trans woman. I've had many conversations about this, private conversations, not just with potential partners, because I don't even deal with men who don't have this type of understanding, as I don't think any trans woman should. But I've counseled a few men in private who are simply and rightfully so confused by their attraction to trans women. The confusion is based on the stigma that trans women aren't real, that they are in fact men, that they are not actually women. And I really believe it is so important to clarify that when you view a straight man dating a trans woman as homosexual, you are misgendering the trans woman and identifying her as a man, when your viewpoint is that it's a gay relationship, or simply not a straight relationship. And I think a lot of people do this without knowing it. There are those that have this viewpoint in an antagonistic and even violent way. However, most people simply think this because of a lack of understanding. And that's no fault of their own. And this is coming from a place of empathy and public awareness. This issue is not just a matter of gender validation and normativity. This issue, in its most harmful incarnation, is the reason why trans women are murdered and ostracized and abused. This is why. It's this stigma that contributes to the abuse and murder of trans women. And while in most people's perceptions, it's harmless, so to speak, because it's not actively violent. But when those perceptions are encouraged and spread and not addressed, even if it's a well-intentioned misunderstanding, it perpetuates the stigma that leads to discrimination, harm, abuse, and death. My advice to men who are maybe struggling with this: in short, you're needlessly struggling with this because you have a perception of a trans woman as not fully female in your own mind. And you have to understand that to undo it. The men that I date have done the work on themselves to not have that. I always make sure to address it, and I wish I didn't have to. But this is always an important thing to clarify. This is the reason why so many men have a behind closed doors or closeted or DL, I hate that word, type of relationship with trans women because they are terrified of being outed as a fag. Nobody likes to be called something that they're not, or to perceive a confusion around an identity that they feel otherwise comfortable with. This is the advice that I give to straight men. If you date a trans woman as a straight man, guess what? You're still a straight man. Men often ask me how they go about coming out as trans attracted and all this, and I always say, every time I say, you do not need to come out as anything. In fact, it is more important that you maintain your identity, to affirm your heterosexuality and validate the existence of trans women as women. Because you maintaining your heterosexual identity is so much more effective in spreading the right kind of awareness than it is to come out as something. Because when you view dating trans women as something you need to come out about, it still paints the woman and the relationship as something other, something that we as trans women have dealt with our entire lives. There's microaggressions, and then there's the obvious, much more harmful aggressions that come out of that. This is why there's not as much openness around dating trans women, because there is that stigma. And that stigma is very, very harmful. And I think viewing things in this way, while I'm sure other people may have their opinions, certainly, I think it's very, very important to validate a man's heterosexuality in this regard. In summary, if you're a straight man and you're attracted to trans women, you're still a straight man. All we ask of you is to treat us like any other woman and defend our honor as women. And that's the greatest thing you can do as a man. I hope this makes things a little bit easier for people, because it's really important. So important to erase the stigma around this issue. And this is not meant to criticize as much as encourage change by inferring that you don't really need to do much to change. You don't really need to change anything at all about yourself. You're perfect as you are. And it takes a strong man to come to terms with the fact that there's really nothing to come to terms with except being there for your woman and having her back, like any good man should.
Silly.